Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. Star Trek's 50th anniversary is less than a month away, so I have to get into high gear for reviews. So far, we've looked at my favorite episodes of the original series, a really good book about Kirk and crew, and a really bad movie about them as well, along with the movie featuring a new version of them. So, seeing as how this is the last review I'm gonna do before my big 50th anniversary review, I figure that I should look at something from one of the men who has made Star Trek as everlasting as it is. William Shatner wrote several Star Trek novels detailing Kirk's resurrection following his unfulfilling and pointless death in Star Trek Generations. In my top 15 original series episodes video, I mentioned that he becomes a Borg and the books get crazy. Well, I was lying a bit. When I made that video, I had only read his second and third trilogies, and not the original one. Yes, Kirk becomes a Borg in the second book. The first book, The Ashes of Eden, aside from a brief scene at the beginning and end, takes place entirely during the gap between Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and the beginning of Star Trek Generations, meaning there's no Borg and no contact with the Next Generation crew of any kind. My bad. Though this book is really good, and for someone who has said that he's never watched Star Trek because he doesn't like watching himself, the book adheres pretty nicely to canon, which is probably in part because Shatner had help from Garfield and Judith Reeves-Stevens, who are pretty well-known Trek novelists. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Ashes of Eden is meant to detail Kirk's issues with retirement following the decommissioning of the Enterprise A and his subsequent involvement with yet another Starfleet conspiracy involving the Klingons. Shatner had success with his Tech War series, but did he find the same success writing for the series that made him, along with many others, household names? Let's find out. The cover is weird. I'm not sure why, but I find it unsettling. We've got Captain Kirk embracing a woman in the foreground as the Enterprise A flies in the background, and then, looming over the horizon like Starfleet has just received a grim reminder, is William Shatner's head staring into my soul. He's even bigger than the title. I've heard Shatner's ego was big, but I had no idea it was big enough to overshadow the title of the book. I kid, even though it's a weird cover, it's still my second favorite of the trilogy. Anyway, let's get to the book. The book opens in 2371, with Spock leaning over Kirk's grave on Veridian 3, sad that he cannot repay the favor of bringing him back from the dead, like Kirk had done for him in Star Trek 3. Then we truly start on Tycho 4, as Kirk evades the Dichoronium cloud creature while serving on the USS Farragut. Unfortunately, if you've seen the TOS episode Obsession, you know this encounter won't end well. Kirk argues with Andrevar Drake, a fellow crew member that Kirk doesn't like, and when the time comes to call for phasers, Kirk doesn't hesitate and fires phasers at the creature. The creature destroys the Farragut and then comes back down to kill Kirk and his away team. Kirk realizes he's out of options and solemnly says, "End program," revealing that this was a simulation on a proto-holodeck, where Kirk has to wear a VR suit to use it. I always assumed that the Oculus would get smaller as time went on. A technician tells him that one day they won't need the suit, and that the holodeck will be completely indistinguishable from real life, but that's just ridiculous. He also tells Kirk that based on the simulation, his hesitation saved lives, despite all the deaths that happened that day, and that the computer is programmed with his exploits. Kirk asks why they would do that, and the technician tells Kirk that he's a hero, but Kirk doesn't consider himself one. He did his job, nothing more, nothing less. It's just a job, 5 days a week. Kirk's not really enjoying retirement, as since he proved in Star Trek the Motion Picture, he can't bear to be away from the captain's chair. Meanwhile, Chekov and Uhura are busy doing arms deals with Klingons, and the Klingon alludes to Chekov getting kicked out of Starfleet for punching an admiral. I'd say I hope it was Cartwright, but he's been through enough on this show in the last few months. The deal goes south, and Chekov and Uhura are betrayed by their associate Jade, after the Klingon mentions something called Chal, and they are stuck in a cargo bay that is about to be depressurized, which will kill them. Kirk talks with Carol Marcus about a decision pertaining to his family's farm, as since his parents and brother are dead, along with his brother's wife and his nephews, have no plans to return to Earth from wherever they went after Kirk stopped the parasites at the Deneva colony, Kirk is the only one left to decide what happens to it, which is conflicting him, along with his conflicts about losing the Enterprise yet again. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are invited to a banquet to introduce the new commander of Starfleet, following Admiral Cartwright's dismissal following the whole killing Chancellor Gorkin thing. The new commander is none other than Angtramar Drake, Kirk's old rival from the Farragut. At the banquet, Kirk crosses paths with a beautiful, seemingly half-Klingon, half-Romulan woman. Spock and McCoy are incredulous to his feelings, as she looks young enough to be Kirk's daughter, but they don't have time to talk about it because Drake walks up to talk with his old pal Jimbo Kirk. Drake asks Kirk if he wonders what would have happened if Kirk hadn't taken back the Enterprise following the V'ger crisis, since he and Drake had parallel careers up until that point. When Kirk left the desk job behind to make a difference again and got himself demoted, Drake became Commander Starfleet. Drake takes pleasure in informing Kirk that following its decommissioning, the Enterprise A is going to be used for war games, which hurts Kirk as the Enterprise was one of Kirk's many loves. And then Drake pours salt in the wound by making reference to keeping a piece of the Enterprise to show his grandkids, which Drake knows that Kirk won't have because of David's death in Star Trek III. Chekov and Uhura await their deaths, but since we know that Chekov can't die until at least the launch of the Enterprise B, and maybe even longer considering his part in Star Trek Online, they end up sitting on the transporter pad of the USS Excelsior, having been saved by Sulu, who was watching them, revealing them as Starfleet intelligence agents. They run through what the Klingon had said about Chal and discover that it translates to Children of Heaven, though they don't know anything else. They think that it might be a weapon, so they plan to head back to inform Starfleet. Also, a rift forms between Chekov and Sulu because of Chekov being angry that Sulu waited until the absolute last second to save them, which could have cost him and Uhura their lives. It's not Sulu's fault, though. That's just how the infinite improbability drive works. Kirk goes to the farm, but is immediately on edge because someone else is there. It's the woman from the banquet, Taylani, and he asks her about her heritage, and she explains that she's the result of a failed joint colony venture involving the Klingons and Romulans, likely in the fallout of the Coalition of Planets and the Earth-Romulan War. Before they can talk more, however, they are attacked by several assailants. Kirk, despite his age, is relatively agile in escaping, and takes Taylani to an old bomb shelter that he had discovered one summer with his brother Sam. However, he also discovers something strange about the assailants. They are young and also appear to have the same heritage as Taylani, who tells Kirk that they aren't after her, but him. Kirk fights the youths, but tears something in his shoulder in the process, and he accidentally kills them, although he didn't think he fought hard enough to do that. He asks Taylani why they were after him, and she tells him that they didn't want him to help her to bring peace to her world named Chal. Taylani helps patch him up, and he checks for an injury he watched her sustain during the fight, but it's already begun to heal rapidly. And she tells him that her world has a gift, a fountain of youth, keeping all its inhabitants young forever, and asks Kirk to come with her to stay young forever on Chal. They get close, and she explains the history of Chal, a joint colony that the Klingons and Romulans abandoned, and flashes through moments of his life as captain of the Enterprise, and Kirk decides that he wants to make a difference again, and will help Taylani, but first he has to talk it over with his two closest friends. He goes to see Spock, who's living in France, and invites McCoy as well, and they tell him that he's crazy. They'll support his decision no matter what, but they don't agree with it. Kirk goes with Taylani to the San Francisco travel port and leaves a farewell message for Carol Marcus before getting in a shuttle piloted by another of Taylani's species, which I'll call hybrids for brevity's sake. Kirk asks how she'll get them to Chal, and she tells him that she's secured transportation aboard a vessel that Kirk will approve of. That ship is, of course, the Enterprise, though the name is gone and it's been stripped of all of Starfleet's specialized technology. Chal had negotiated for it as the first step in a planetary defense force, and she offers it as a gift to Kirk for agreeing to help her. He takes his seat in the captain's chair, and the matter-antimatter engines start up, and Kirk feels a familiar presence, contacting engineering to find that along with himself, Taylani had also recruited Montgomery Scott to help run the ship, since he knows it better than anyone. Kirk orders the pilot to set course for Chal, but not before almost calling him Sulu. Meanwhile, Sulu, Chekhov, and Uhura meet with Drake in order to tell him their findings, and he calls Spock and McCoy to the meeting as well. He tells them that he believes that Cartwright was just the tip of the iceberg, that there are a lot of traitors bent on preventing peace between the Federation and Klingon Empire. Drake tells them that Jade's records have been erased from Starfleet's database, and he went looking for someone who would have motive to prevent the Federation and Klingons from enacting peace. And he comes up with James T. Kirk. Chekhov is outraged, knowing that Kirk would never do that, but Drake tells him that he has reason to believe that there are secret Klingon doomsday weapons on the planet, Chal, which Kirk just so happens to have left for the day before. The only thing left for them to do is locate Chal and find Kirk to bring him to justice. Only problem is they don't know where Chal is, so they have to try to track the Enterprise's warp signature. The former Enterprise crew boards the Excelsior and prepares to track down Kirk. Enterprise, one to beam up. I'm sorry, Captain. I'm giving her all she's got, but the transporters aren't working. We'll be right back. And we're back. They have a meeting where Spock tells them that either Drake is telling the truth, which is unlikely, since Kirk would never commit treason for any one or thing, or that Drake is lying or passing on false information for some reason. Chekhov then drops the bomb that after David's death, Kirk became obsessed with Genesis, and asked Chekhov to compile all the info he could, discovering that Drake was the one who gave the proto-matter to David. That caused Genesis to be unstable. It was untraceable, so Kirk couldn't present it to Starfleet, but it raises an interesting query. Drake may possibly have engineered Kirk's trip to Chal as a way to take down Kirk, although Spock can find no motive for him to do so. He tells them that they need to figure out what links Jade and Taylani in order to find out the truth, but since they're under orders to leave Earth, they don't have time to research it, so they're on their own. Meanwhile, Jade shows up at Drake's house because along with being an intelligence agent, she's also his daughter. They talk about their plans to seize the children of heaven and use it for themselves, while using Kirk and his crew to find it. The Enterprise stops at Prestor 5 to negotiate for weapons to replace the ones Starfleet took back, and Kirk and Scotty have a drink at the bar. Taylani negotiated for disruptor cannons, torpedoes, and some upgrades to replace everything that was stripped, and Scotty tells Kirk that the Enterprise will be back to full in a few weeks. Taylani tells Kirk that they're being followed by a Tholian starcruiser, and she wants to use a false warp trail to distract them. Kirk agrees, although he's still not sure about why the Enterprise needs full weapons capability if it's protecting a planet that nobody knows about. She assures him that they need to stop the other faction on her planet, and he takes her at her word, and 10 days later they land on Chal, which Taylani tells him means heaven. The Excelsior makes it to Prestor 5, and they decide to go down undercover to find out what Kirk was up to. Kirk enjoys his time on Chal, riding horse-like creatures and making love to Taylani, but not everything is good. The planet is attacked by what Taylani calls the Anarchists, who are attempting to converge on a building in the center of their city. Kirk calls Scotty and asks him if the Enterprise can help, but they can't beam all 20 of the attackers away, and the weapons aren't precise enough, so he has to use a low-level disruptor burst to knock them out. After that's done, Kirk demands to know everything that Taylani has been keeping from him. Spock, Chekhov, and McCoy go down to Press Door 5 to get information on where Kirk is heading, and they get it, but also start a bar fight and almost get Chekhov's arm broken in the process. Kirk reveals the secret of Chal to Scotty, who is not very enthusiastic about using the Enterprise as a gunboat for what seems to be a political squabble, and after learning what Chal holds, he's ready to help, though still not sure if Kirk is making the right decision to abandon his life for Taylani. The Excelsior loses the warp trail, but finds 3 in its place, and they don't know which one to follow, and time is of the essence, so they can't guess. They ask Spock which one to follow, since Kirk is likely to leave a trail that only Spock could use, and he tells them his choice, which leads them right into Klingon space, and face-to-face with 3 battlecruisers. Kirk takes one of the anarchists prisoner, and the prisoner gives him a new point of view to consider. That Taylani lied to him, and that the right thing to do is to destroy Chal instead of hiding it. He tells him that the center of the city is an armory, which holds the truth about Chal, but before he can explain more, the attackers from the farm, who are very much alive, come into the brig, stun Kirk and the prisoner, before their leader comes out, who is Taylani, who tells Kirk that it's over and that they won. Sulu tries to explain to the Klingon that Drake had gotten clearance from their Chancellor, but they don't have time to wait until it can be verified. Before they can get into too big a fight, though, a Warp 10 shuttle shows up carrying Drake, who docks with the Excelsior. Kirk wakes up after dreaming about Carol and David and how she refused to let him help raise David from space, and when he awakes he confronts Taylani, but they don't have much time for discussion since 2 Klingon battlecruisers show up on sensors, and Kirk and Taylani beam up to the Enterprise. The Klingons hail the Enterprise, and Kirk is shocked to see Sulu being escorted by Klingon ships. He is less surprised to see Drake, who tells him that he's beaming down to Chal on official Starfleet business. Kirk won't let that happen, so he has Scotty detonate a few photon torpedoes in the ionosphere so they can't beam down. Spock and McCoy also make their presence on the Excelsior known to Kirk, and Drake orders that Kirk withdraw. Kirk refuses, and Drake orders Sulu to blow the Enterprise out of the sky, and Kirk flees into the ionosphere, where the sensors won't let Excelsior lock onto them, and then they go to warp, allowing them to put themselves in a better position. But the Excelsior still has better weapons, and Drake orders Sulu to finish Kirk off. But he refuses, as do all of Kirk's comrades, who decide to call a board of inquiry to determine Drake's frame of mind before he can order Kirk's destruction, giving Kirk more time to figure out what's in the armory that Drake wants. Taylani and Kirk beam into the armory and discover its purpose, a munitions dump and museum set up by the Klingons and Romulans for their colonists, with disruptor pistols, uniforms, and even a buried Romulan warbird. They also discover that the colonists weren't born, but genetically engineered to be the best of both Klingon and Romulan, to take over in the event that both species were annihilated by the Federation. But they also had tissue transplants taken forcibly from humans, which is why the anarchists want the city destroyed, because they know their heritage and were disgusted to learn the cost of their amazing abilities. Their immortality isn't because of the planet, but because of the mutilation of innocence, and Taylani is horrified, but Kirk tells her that whatever her heritage is, she can change that and help her people change and overcome their troubled past. But as they embrace, they are held at gunpoint by Drake's daughter. Adrian Drake tries to convince Taylani that Kirk wanted the secrets of Chal and to use the transplanted human organs to grant himself immortality, but Taylani doesn't buy it. But Adrian does reveal interesting information. The armory is activated by Taylani's life signs. Kirk remembers the 2 attackers at the farm that he thought he killed, who showed up alive later, and tells Taylani to use the same trick to turn the armory off. Kirk destroys the computer near him when the lights go out, and he goes after Adrian, who found another computer, but he's stopped when 4 beings beam down, 3 Klingons and Angravard Drake. Kirk holds Adrian with a phaser to her head, but Drake doesn't care since she's ready to die for what she believes in, avenging her mother's death. Drake reveals his motivations, that his wife was killed by the Klingons during the war that the Organians stopped in Errand of Mercy, meaning he could never take revenge on the Klingons or the one responsible for bringing in the Organians, Kirk, until now. Kirk released Adrian, refusing to stoop to the level that Drake did in causing David's death, and beams back to the Enterprise. Kirk returns to the brig, finding it stocked no longer with Taylani's people, but his crew, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, and Chekhov. Drake returns to the Klingon ship and starts firing on them, and the Enterprise and Excelsior fight back, but Drake retreats, planning to use the slingshot effect to fly back in time a week to kill Kirk before he got into the armory. Kirk asks Sulu if the Excelsior can do it, but it's never been attempted before in an Excelsior class, and they don't have time for guesswork. So Kirk takes the Enterprise towards the sun, following Drake. Scotty doesn't think the Enterprise would make a temporal jump, but Kirk says all they have to do is stop Drake from making his, which they do, and Drake continues going after the Enterprise, but the Enterprise is no max that close to the sun, and the Enterprise is lost. Drake revels in his victory, but the ship is hailed by the Excelsior, and on the bridge is Kirk. Kirk tells Drake that he can help him, since the sun's radiation will destroy the Klingon ship if he doesn't get off, but Drake refuses Kirk's help, and it's destroyed with all hands. They return to Chal, and Kirk gives Taylani a gift, the Enterprise dedication plaque for her grandchildren when she has them, but he can't stay with her, since his life is with Starfleet. They head back for Earth on the Excelsior so Kirk, Scotty, and Chekhov can make the trip for the shakedown cruise of the Enterprise B, and Spock and McCoy have an argument as Kirk, like he did at the end of Star Trek II, feels young again. In 2371, Spock stands over Kirk's grave and sees light emanating from it, and the appearance of a ship going to warp above him. He initially dismisses it as impossible, but Kirk simply thinks that there are many possibilities as the novel ends. And that was The Ashes of Eden. No Kirk of Borg or Mirror Universe shenanigans, but it's a pretty good setup for things to come. The book feels like Star Trek, and all the dialogue sounds natural reading it in the voices of the characters. Although Chekhov's dialogue is written with the W's swapped out for V's, so that might be contributing to it. Shatner did a great job, as did the reeves-stevens. Honestly, it's one of the better Star Trek books out there, and like Imzadi and Killing Time, it manages to evoke memories of the fan-favorite episodes of the show and the movies, while not making me want to put down the book to go watch the episodes and movies. Drake's addition is a little forced since Kirk never mentioned him before or since, but then again, with their relationship, I'd assume that he'd want to avoid talking about Drake. Kirk doesn't act out of character, and even though he is the big damn hero, his feats are always backed up by the Enterprise crew, so even when Kirk himself wrote it, he doesn't take the spotlight. Spock and the others are equal to him in terms of saving both Chal and the universe. It's a shame that Kirk had to watch yet another Enterprise be destroyed, but I never liked the idea of the Enterprise A being decommissioned and taken apart anyway. It went out with honor this way. Taylani is an interesting character, and I'm happy that unlike many of Kirk's loves, she didn't have to die for Kirk to lose her. But this isn't her last appearance in the so-called Shatnerverse, so I'll talk about her more when she shows up again. All in all, this is a great start to a pretty awesome trilogy that only gets more action-packed from here. We probably won't get to the return by the time the 50th rolls around next month, but I'll review that eventually. Kirk might be canonically dead, but at least he gets to live on in Shatner's novels. I think these are pretty damn good, and Shatner is definitely one of the people who gets what Star Trek is meant to do, inspire hope. And these books take a character that we lost and brought hope that he could live again. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of the Literary Lair, you can hit that subscribe button. And if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. See you next time. And as of today, all of Scarab's security measures should have been implemented. It's taken nearly 3 months, but I think we have all of them installed. Photonic energy detectors, EM pulse generator, and photonic dampening field. Good. When can we get the new security grid active? Immediately. Unfortunately, in order to do that, I need to reset it from the main grid, which is outside. It'll also mean that all security will be shut down for at least 5 minutes. No problem, I'll keep watch. I'll be back once I get it active. I've been waiting for you to come back. How flattering. It's you. Surprised to see me? I hope Mike Sano still has that antidote lying around. You won't be needing it. I no longer have to reside in your diseased brain. You fled into the computer that Mike Sano's double stole. That's how you knew how to destroy Iota. Smart. And now I have been given a body. One that I will use to destroy yours. Nice try. Iota force fields. Good thing I never connected those to the security grid, huh? How quaint. Hologram, remember? Damn it. I can't believe you still use that silly toy. I love being a hologram. You know, I have the choice of any weapon to kill you with, but I think these are the most fitting. I'm going to enjoy this. Wait! What? But I'm so close! What happened? I turned the grid on and everything went crazy. The man in black. The adaptive virus. He's the hologram. How is that even possible? He was in the computer that your double stole. I guess I did make him pretty adaptive. You know, I had expected a new opponent. Not him. He knows my fears, weaknesses. He's been inside my mind. He knows just what buttons to press to drive me berserk. You've always spoken about it so casually. I didn't think the experience had affected you this way. Neither did I, but seeing him and knowing that I'm not going to be able to stop him as easily this time, I'm scared. And I've never been scared of anyone I fought before. They were always human. They had weaknesses. And I had help. And you still have help. A lot of it. You're right. Let's test the security grid.